Welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's art project grants for fiscal year 2021, which for us runs from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I am Carolyn Koska. I'm the Financial and Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. First, I'll just run down the list of what we're going to talk about today. We'll start out and I'll tell you just a little bit about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll go through the program guidelines for this grant. We'll take a look at what resources are available for you on our website. Then we'll go into the grant system and walk through the application, and we will finish up with just an overview of the whole grant process. As far as asking questions, I've got you all muted right now. So if you have questions coming up as we're going through today, please type those in the chat window. I will stop at a couple different places to answer some of those questions for you. And then at the end of the presentation, I will unmute all of you if there's more that you want to talk about directly. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. This down in the corner here is our region that we cover in the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes mostly from the state of Minnesota. We have an allocation through their general fund, and then we also receive arts and cultural heritage or legacy funds. Both of those funds will be funds that you would receive applying under this grant program. We also receive funds from the McKnight Foundation that we use for our grants for individual artists. And then finally, we receive funds from donations and memberships from our area counties, organizations, businesses, and individuals. Some things that we are committed to: supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So it's good to keep these commitments in mind as you're thinking about projects you may want to do, because everything needs to relate back to these. So our grant program for the day, Art Projects. The intent of that program is to stimulate and encourage the creation, performance, and appreciation of the arts. These grants are open to both nonprofit organizations, which we most often see those organizations who have their 501c3. We also accept applications from unofficial nonprofit organizations, but they will need to have a fiscal sponsor. We will talk about that a little bit more later. And these are also open to units of government, which would be city or county government. Schools should apply through our Arts in the Schools grant program, not in this program. Your organization needs to be located within the 18 counties of our service region, which are listed there for you, or on tribal lands within our service area. We acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. Now we'll just talk about types of projects you can do with this grant. You can have music performances, whether brought in to your community or put on by community choirs, bands, orchestras, dance, community theater or prepackaged theater, such as Prairie Fire or Missoula. Visual art exhibits, readings by authors, art classes for community members, public art, and arts festivals. So that's just an overview of the types of projects you could do with this grant. The art project grant is available for up to $7,000, with the prepackaged theater project only available for up to $2,500. That matches what is available in a similar program under our schools program. Normally, we require that the applicant come up with at least a 20% match toward their project, but in this year, we are not requiring any matching funds. So you would not need to find any additional funding for your project if your project's costs are within the amount that you can request. And a reminder that applicants who have received an operating support grant from us cannot include prorated operating type costs in a budget for other grants like this art project grant. Here are a few eligibility items. The following are not eligible for these grants: projects that don't have an art focus, activities of a for-profit project, organization, or business, educational projects within a school system. Again, schools need to apply under their own grant program. Requiring artists to pay excessive entry or exhibition fees, activities that take place outside of Minnesota. Since we're using state funds for all of these grants, we are required that all activities take place within the state. Activities not open to the public, religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events. In other words, the grant funding should enable your project to break even, not to make a profit. Also ineligible are payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, grant funds being used to match another SMOT grant, and applicants with past due final reports. So this is just an overview of some of those eligibility guidelines, so make sure to check. We have both program guidelines that are specific to this grant program and general grant guidelines that apply to all of our grants. So make sure to check both of those documents, and I will show you later on today where you can find those. So you'll need to have both a start date and an end date for your project. And your start date is really when anything towards your project starts happening. So you could not do activities like these before your start date: auditions, rehearsals, ordering supplies, paying any fees or contracts, or advertising. As soon as you have done one of those things, that is considered your project having started. So your start date should not be the date of your first activity or event, because you can't spend any grant funds before the project start date. If there's something that you must pay for before that date, if you have to make a deposit on a contract, for instance, you cannot include that expense in your project budget. And another reminder, no advertising can take place before the start date. It's okay if you just briefly post this event is happening on this date, but no actual advertising is allowed before your start date. So it's good to just be thinking ahead and make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. You'll also need an end date for your project, and all projects that are awarded this year must be finished up by June 30th, 2022. Here are the deadlines we have this year. We have our round one coming up pretty soon with a deadline of September 9th. for projects beginning November 1st or later. Round 2, December 9th for projects beginning February 1st or later, and round 3, March 24th for projects beginning May 1st or later. I do want to point out that these deadlines are definitely not set in stone this year. We still have some uncertainty with the amount of funding we are going to be receiving this year. Just know that these are tentative dates. I will also point out that it's important to know that applications need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on the deadline date. The system will not let you submit your application after that time. For your grant project, you'll need to have a project director and an authorizing official. The project director is the person who is most directly responsible for the project. Oftentimes it is the grant writer, not always. And then you'll need your authorizing official, who can be the president, treasurer, or someone else from your organization who has authorizing power. And it's important to note that the project director and authorizing official cannot be the same person. So if, for instance, the president of your organization is acting in the role of project director, then you would need to choose someone else like your treasurer to be your authorizing official. Both of these people will need to sign the application, the contract, and the final report. If your organization does not have 501c3 status or is not an official unit of government, you'll need to find an organization that is one of those things to act as your fiscal sponsor. And before you're applying, you'll need to come up with a signed agreement between your organization and theirs that spells out the relationship of how this fiscal sponsorship is working. And you'll need to submit that with your application. So a representative of the fiscal sponsor organization will need to sign your application, contract, and final report. And then that fiscal sponsor organization will receive the grant funds, and they are legally responsible for the management of the funds and the completion of the project. I will stop now for a few minutes, see if we have any questions. Just wait a few minutes here if there's anything you'd like to type into that chat window. Not seeing any questions coming through. I think we will move on. And we're going to take a look at what is here for you on our website. On our website, there are two places where you can access our online grant system. One is on the home page. If you just scroll down a little bit, there's this black grants box there, and you can click to log in there. Otherwise, there's a login available on each of the grant pages. And we'll find our art project grants. So here you'll see there's an apply now button here that'll take you to the login page. So what is here on this page for you? We've got all of our important dates listed, deadlines, when you can expect the applications to have been acted on, your start dates for these rounds that we have this year. Then we have a bunch of materials posted here for you. Here are the grant guidelines for this specific program, the general grant guidelines that apply to all of our grant programs. Here we have a Word document of the application questions. Some people like to work on a draft within that Word document and then paste everything into the text fields in the application later. So that's available if that's something you'd like to do. We have the budget form here, but you can also get that within the application. Here are the criteria that the review panel will use to score your application, just so you get an idea of what they're looking for. Then we've got here questions that you'll be asked for your final report if you need to look ahead to make sure you're gathering certain information. And then we've got a couple different tutorials here for you. One, this video tutorial is just a quick overview of how to get started in the grant system. And then this grant system guide PDF goes into more detail about what all of the buttons do. So we are going to start an application. We'll click the Apply Now button, which takes us to the login page. If you are totally new to the grant system, you'll need to click the Create a New Account here. If you have an existing account, you can go ahead and log in when you arrive at this page. But if you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account, please contact us and we can get that figured out for you. So we will log in here. If you have applied for grants within the system previously, when you log in, you'll come to this applicant dashboard. But if it's your first time logging in and you have not started any applications yet, you will go straight to this apply page. And this page lists all of the grant programs that are currently available, with some reminders about some of the parameters and dates. For these, if you want to preview the application, there's a button here if you just want to take a look at it without actually starting anything. But we're going to hit the apply button over here. So as you're getting started, you'll see a couple of buttons over here that I want to talk about. You've got the Copy Previous Answers button. This will, if you have filled out other applications in the system before, you can go back and grab one of those other applications and it will copy over your answers to any questions that are the same between those two applications. So that is a real shortcut if you are doing a returning grant. Then we have the Collaborate button. If you want to work with someone on the application, you can click this button here, enter that person's email address, select what kind of permissions you want to give them, stick in a message asking them either, can you fill in this section, or will you please proofread the application? And then you would click the invite button. They will receive an email. They don't need to already have an account in the system, but it will ask them when they click on the link through that email to create at least a password. They can come back and create a full account at another time if they want to, but then they can log in and be working on the application with you. If you run into any questions or need some help while you are working on your application, there's a link here to schedule a meeting with me, whether by phone or online. And this will just take you to a scheduling system that works very easily. So you'll need a name for your project. Here's some examples of names. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just describing what your project is going to be about. Here's where you will put in the amount you're requesting, but you'll probably want to wait until after you've done your budget form to put in that amount. We've got links again here to the guidelines and that Word document with the application questions in it. There's a reminder about the character limit for the text fields. You'll see that it's really a quite large limit, and we just want to make you aware that we are not at all expecting you to use that all up. we want to provide enough space if there was some question that you really needed to provide a lot of explanation, but in general, our reviewers appreciate concise answers to these questions. And then here again is the scoring criteria that they'll be using. So you will start out describing your project. It tells you some of the things you'll need to talk about your project later in the application, so you don't have to cover it twice, but just tell us what you are planning to do. Here's where you'll enter in your start date and end date for your project. We've got a spot for you to put the information of any events that you're having, dates and times. From this, we take this information and put it on our area arts calendar, which posts all arts events in our region, or at least arts events that we have been made aware of. So it's important to have the specifics about your event here so that we can get them on our calendar. Now we come to the artistic quality and merit section, which is the section that is worth the most points for your application. So this is really important to have good information here. You'll start out on this section talking about your artistic vision for this project, which artists you've chosen and why, or if you are instead putting on a concert or a theater projection, why did you choose those pieces of music or that show? So just a lot of information about why and who for what your project is all about. We ask you to submit artist resumes or bios for all the artists that are going to be participating in the project. If you don't know who that person is yet, if, for instance, you're putting on a series of classes and you still need to find artists with particular skills to fill that position instead of submitting a resume, because you wouldn't have one yet, you would include a kind of a job description of what you're looking for and how you would find that person. So we've got a couple places where you can upload files here. If you click the button, it'll bring you to your files on your computer, and you can just choose what you need and upload there. Then we come to work samples from your artists. We need to have a sample of work from all of the artists that are participating in your project. We've got some information here of parameters for the different types of samples you might be submitting. If you are submitting something like images, you'd need to combine multiple images into one document or a couple of documents in order to upload. We've got a few links here that can help you with that if you are not sure how to do that. And anytime you are running into issues with your work samples, please contact us and we can do what we can to help you get those attached here. So there are three large upload fields here for things that you can upload. Down below, we'll get there in a second, there are some website fields if you're providing links. And if you are providing only links and not uploading anything, you'll need to just type that into this box here to satisfy the requirement of having something for your work samples. So down below here are those website links. If you type in a link into one of the text fields, that will not be clickable. So that's why it's important to put those links in these special link fields. And for both, whether the samples that you're uploading or the links, you'll need to describe what you are providing. Next, we ask about impact, why the activity is important to your community and what artistic needs it's meeting for those who are involved, how it might be helping your organization grow, but also how it's building on your mission and previous programming. Then we've got an outcome evaluation plan where you need to choose what your goals are and how you are going to measure them. So you'll start out choosing 1 to 3 of the Minnesota Arts outcomes that are in this link. This is something that's being used statewide. So here are the art outcomes for you to choose from. So like I said before, choose 1 to 3 of these. Remember the numbers, and then we will come back, you'd stick those numbers in here. Next, for each one of those that you chose, you'll need to tell us what skill, knowledge, attitude, behavior will change related to that outcome that you chose. These outcomes here are very broad, so you'll need to really narrow it down and make it specific to your project. And then you'll also need to talk about how you plan to measure or prove that your goal has been met and that those changes have taken place. So we have a sample here of how someone might go about this process of thinking this through. Here's their sample project. They chose a couple outcomes here. Here's what they thought would change as a result of their project. Then they said how they were going to measure. In this instance, it says choir members will be surveyed at the beginning and at the end of the season on their knowledge and skill of several things. And then what you would look for in the data that you collected that indicates that those changes had taken place. And then finally, at the bottom here, this is what how these translate into something that you would type into the text box in the application. So we've got, if you'd like to use it, a blank outcomes worksheet here just to walk you through that process. If you are using a survey, for instance, to as your form of measurement for your program, it's a really good idea to attach that here so people have an idea of, are you actually going to find out whether you have met these goals through the survey that you are doing. Again, if you are using a different method for evaluation and not a survey, then you may not have something to upload here, but it's a really good idea if you're planning to do a survey to have that available here. Then you'll put in some information about audience numbers. Then we come to a question about how your project will be reaching the underserved. So we're asking you to look at underserved and underrepresented populations and also at providing access to people with disabilities. So you'll start out by describing the groups in your community that are underserved. So that might be a longer list of anybody in your community that could be underserved, maybe by race or language or socioeconomic level, et cetera. Then you'll need to choose one or more of those groups and explain how you're going to reach out to them or involve them in your project. And it gives you some examples here of things that you could do. And then finally, it asks about your access for people with disabilities, whether you have an ADA access plan and how you will make sure that this project is accessible, and make sure to think about disabilities beyond just related to mobility. This next section is kind of about your ability to accomplish the project that you're proposing. We ask if there are any other personnel besides those artists that you put information about above who have a really large role in your project. If, for instance, you're hiring someone to manage your project, so you would give their information here. We ask for some information about your planning and publicity for your project, what kind of support you've had or plan to have from the community, if you are getting financial support, volunteers, in-kind donations, etc. Then you have your budget form. For those of you who are previous grantees, this budget form will be new to you. We are trying this year a PDF budget form rather than Excel that we had used in the past. You'll still open the form, fill it out, save it to your computer, and then upload it back into your application. But it's got spaces for you to type. We'll put in some amounts, and you'll see that it is adding up for you here. So you'll put all of your expenses in this cash cost of the project section and get a total there. Then you will put in if you're expecting any ticket income, if you have any other donations that you're either anticipating or have already received. You would put that in there. And then finally, under this other funding section, if your organization is contributing any of its own cash for the project. So that again will total for you. And this year, since we are not doing any match, your maximum request amount will be calculated based on the total cash cost minus the other funding you say you're getting. So this tells you you cannot request more than $4,500. So we're looking for this profit to equal zero. So if we put 4,500 in there, that'll be zero. If we are requesting too much, whoops, you'll see now we have a profit of 500, and this will remind you if your profit is more than zero, reduce your grant request by that amount. That would put us back at 4,500. Or if we are not requesting enough, we'll have a negative profit, and you would need to increase your other funding then. So anyway, you would fill this out, save it to your computer, and upload it here into this file. Just a reminder that for that PDF form to calculate, you will need to have the file open in Adobe Reader. And if you don't have that, you can follow this link here to get that. So please let us know how this new budget form is working for you as we are trying something different this year. You've got a budget narrative form. You can put in any details in here that didn't really fit into that budget spreadsheet. If you have equipment purchases or labor greater than $500, we ask you to provide 2 bids for each item that is over $500. So we've got fields for uploading that there. Then we just need some information about your organization. Your mission statement, a short history, the kinds of programs you offer, who you serve, and just any other information about your organization's role in the artistic development of the community. We'll need a list of your board members with their qualifications, and just some information about how your board is chosen, how often they meet. Then this next question, and that asks if your organization is an official government unit. If it is, and you click yes, you will just go on. If you are not a city or county official government unit and you click no, there will be some annual financial information questions that will appear here. So you would enter in your beginning balance for your most recently completed fiscal year, the income for that year, the expenses, and then your ending balance for that year. And here's just a little formula to help you if things are not adding up. And then here you can comment on that if you'd like to. Then we've got a section that's just gathering some data. This section does not have any bearing on your application at all. It's just some data that we collect and pass on to the state. So you'll see a lot of these questions have links that say view codes. If you do click on that, it'll give you your choices, and then you'll just say 05D is my code and enter that into here. Then just some information about demographics of who you are serving. And this audience question is different from the previous one. The previous one was just about the specific event for this project, and this is asking for annual numbers. Then we've got a section on contact information. If your organization maybe goes by a different name than the legal name that's on all your paperwork, you would put that information here, and we can use your alternate name for publicity. But here's the contact information for the project director, for the authorizing official. Then we ask who is actually the grant writer in case we are going through this application. We have some questions that need to contact you. So you would mark either it was the project director, authorizing official, or owner of this count, but neither of those two. Or if you click other, it'll let you fill in that information so we can get a hold of you if there's something we need you to do with your application. Next question, is your organization using a fiscal sponsor? If you say yes, it will bring up contact information for your fiscal sponsor and a place to upload the agreement that you have with them. Here's an example of an agreement that someone has. If you say, no, you are not using a fiscal sponsor, then you'll get to choose if you're awarded a grant where you would like the funds sent. Then we've got your 501c3 status letter that you need to attach. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, you would upload their 501c3 status letter, and government units are not required to upload anything here. Then finally, we have our signatures. This is a great place to use that collaborate button. You can ask one of these other people, for instance, your fiscal sponsor, to come in and sign the application. So the names would be typed in here, and those act as electronic signatures. Then at the bottom, you can either save your application or submit if you're ready. We're gonna hit save for now. And you'll see it tells us all of the questions that are still not answered. And since we have not done anything, that's all of them. But that's just a good indicator of how much you have left to work on. And you could click continue here to go back and continue working, but we are going to go back to our dashboard. So you'll see now here is this application that we just started. To get back into it, you would click this edit application link. If you have received a grant, you will come in here, and this is the same place where you'll find your contract and your final report. And we will go back to our questions for a moment. Anyone have any questions at this point? I will again stop for just a couple of minutes to see if anyone has anything they'd like to type in. I have not seen any questions come in, so we are going to move ahead. Some tips for when you're getting ready to work on an application. It's a really good idea to start early because there are going to be lots of things that you need to gather, those work samples from your artists, maybe some resumes, maybe some bids from people so you can do your budget. So it's just a really good idea to give yourself a lot of time to work on the application. Another tip is to make sure you read the guidelines carefully, both the guidelines for this program and those general grant guidelines. And if, as you're reading through that, you have any questions, please contact us and we can help you with that. Also good to read those questions fully. You probably saw that most of them have multiple parts to them, so make sure you're covering all of that. While doing that, it still is good to keep your answers really clear and concise. It's a great idea to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about your organization or about your project. Sometimes applicants are so used to a similar project that they do year after year that they may forget to put in some necessary information. So it's a good thing to have somebody else who's not familiar with it read through and see if all of the necessary information is there. Also a great idea to have somebody proofread your application. You can give us a call to talk about your project anytime before you're starting an application. We can kind of direct you if you're not sure which program you should be applying under or if your project is eligible. That's a good thing to do. If you run into questions while you're filling out your application, again, we're here to answer questions. And we can also review your application before you submit it. If you let us know before about 2 weeks before the deadline, we will definitely be able to look at it. If it's closer to the deadline, we can't guarantee that, but we may still be able to. So in this grant review process, staff really is just working as your advocate. We can help you in as you're putting together your application. You'll see the first step of the review process after you submit it is we take a look through that and check for eligibility and making sure that everything is there. So that's kind of where our involvement in the process ends. We don't have any say in who gets funded or not. So after we have checked to make sure that everything is all there, your application will go on to a panel of individuals from around the region who will score the applications and discuss all of that based on the criteria for the grant program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then finally, the board will approve funding based on the recommendations that they get from that grant review panel. So here are the criteria for art projects. First and most important is the artistic quality and merit of the project. That's worth 18 points. The impact on the participants and audience, that's worth 8 points. Reaching the underserved, worth 5 points, and your ability to accomplish the project, worth 5 points. So you will need to pass on each of these criteria and overall in order to be considered for funding. In addition to that, this year we are adding some priorities to our scoring. This happens separately from the review panel, but applicants can also be awarded 1 additional percentage point for each of these criteria that they meet, being a first-time applicant to us, being an organization that's led by or primarily serving BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities. And if you are an applicant from a county that has received a small number of grants from us in the last fiscal year, who maybe is not, that county is not getting as much funding. So those may adjust your score separately from how the review panel has scored it. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete an online contract within 30 days. Then after you've completed your contract, you'll receive 80% of your grant award around the time of your start date, and then you'll receive the remaining 20% after your project and final report are completed. You'll need to acknowledge the grant funding on all of your publicity. That will be a credit line included in your grant contract that you will need to include. And you may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on which funding source your funds have come from. And we will send you posters and logos and credit lines, everything that you need for that, so you don't have to worry about making sure you've got the right information on there. Then you'll need to complete a final report within 60 days after your project end date. So as I mentioned before, it's a good idea to look through that report when you're just starting your project, so you know what kind of information you're going to need to gather. Things like attendance and costs and outcomes. Also, as you're doing your final report, we do really expect you to spend what you proposed in your budget. So after being awarded a grant is not the time to go back and see where you can save a little money here and there. We really need you to spend all of the funding that you receive. And so if it looks like your expenses are going to need to change, you should contact us to get those changes approved in advance. So that's kind of it for the art project grants. I just wanted to mention some other opportunities that are coming up. You'll notice, those of you who are returning grantees, that we did not talk about art legacy projects today. We have actually moved those to be separate deadlines from the art project deadlines. So the art legacy project is a larger scale project that has much more impact. Often they are public art projects. But the webinar that is covering that project, and then the smaller grant that is a planning grant leading up to that, we will talk about those in January. So if that was the program you were looking at today, that is when you will be able to find out about that. We also have a small amount of money coming from the Minnesota Disaster Relief Fund. And we are planning to do some sort of small grant to help arts organizations with technology or equipment that they need in order to do virtual programming. We haven't really worked out all of the details of that, but look for more information on that coming in September. Then just other opportunities to either get help or network with other organizations and artists. We have a grant support open hours the second Tuesday of each month. We are doing that virtually now. On our website, you can find where to connect to that, but the next one coming up for that is next week, August 11th. Then we have been having monthly conversation groups for arts organizations and artists. And for August, organizations are meeting on the 18th at 3 p.m. and artists are meeting on August 20th at 5:30 p.m. Those are networking opportunities, along with there may be a topic of the day that is being discussed. So you can join us for either of those. Check out the information on our website on those. If you need to contact us, the best way right now is email. We are sometimes in the office, but not necessarily guaranteed that we'll be there. So if you're planning to stop in, it's a good idea to call ahead and make sure someone is there. And as our office hours are a little unusual, our phone is also not always accessible to us as well. So email is really the best way to contact us during this time. That is all that I have for the presentation. I can unmute everyone here, and if you have other things that you'd like to talk about, other questions to ask, you can do that now.
Thank you for presenting this. I just have one question. I received an email from the Minnesota State Arts Board about some grants that are available, and I'm wondering if organizations can apply for both through SMOC and through the Minnesota State Arts Board, or does that come from the same pool of money?
It does come from the same pool of money, but that is not a problem. You can apply for grants from both organizations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything they'd like to talk about? If not, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon.